Okay, welcome to those that are here a little bit early. I am streaming to our Facebook group. If you're there and watching this early, grab the link, jump into the Zoom, join us here. So as I often do, I'm encouraging you guys to come and help direct the dialogue here in the Zoom for this 40 or so minutes that we're going to be together. Otherwise, you may be catching this later on Facebook. If so, you were late to the party. So give me a minute here. Let's make sure our tech is in order. It looks like we're streaming live to the group, and it looks like my do not disturb is on. That's good. So I don't take calls in the middle of this, right? That would not be fair to those of you that are here and are committing your time to be here with us. I want to be respectful of that. And that's why we're going to get going in just 1 minute. In the meantime, if you can hear me and see me, drop a comment in the chat here on Zoom if you're here. And again, if you're in Facebook watching this, grab the link. Evan or someone on the team will have dropped it in the chat and come join us. I saw a whole bunch of folks commenting on the post ahead of this call that they were going to be here. So let's make sure we get that link to those folks so they can come join us. And in the meantime, the chat is open. Ed, thank you, buddy. So I know I'm being seen and heard because my man Ed just gave me the thumbs up. And let me make sure my deck is ready for action. We're going to talk on a topic that I love to present on. So those of you that know me and have been in Fix and Flip Foundation for a while, or have just been consumers of my content for a long time, you will know that I geek out on systems and efficiencies. And so how can we be hyper efficient when it comes to project management? Well, you start before you're started. That's how you can be especially efficient. And that's how you can really compress the timeline on these projects, in turn, saving you clearly time, but also money. And most folks don't do anything with regard to a rehab until after they close. And we're going to show you how we spend some money, sure, but really compress time prior to close. So that way, when we do close, we can go right to work. And so this is going to be really valuable for those that are like actively doing deals, in the process of buying deals right now, especially. And if you're looking to ultimately do this, it's better to know the right way, right? Like, don't learn how to do it the wrong way and then deploy that in your business. Like, learn the right way. And then when you do get these opportunities, you'll hit the ground running. So yeah, I'm excited to jump into that. Like I said, this is one of my favorite topics to present on because it's so efficiency driven. And I'm going to make sure that we're ready to roll. And then we're going to go. So like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. I see that a bunch of you are already here, and I trust that the team is going to capture any of the comments that we're getting, any questions that we get outside of Zoom. See if you guys can bridge them over for me. And it's going to be a little bit dense at the beginning. And so I'll likely pause as we go through in this talk and field some questions to make sure that we don't go too far, too fast, because I want folks to really internalize this. Like I said, I love talking on this topic. And so I may come at you guys a little hot and heavy. And that's just, don't mistake my passion for pushiness. I'm going to share my screen now. And you guys will see a presentation in Canva. And I'm going to make sure I have the chat open as well. Looks like our buddy Evan's got, he's navigating the chat over on Facebook, which is great. So Evan, anything you see there that's relevant, drop it here. I've got this chat off to the right. And so if I'm looking away from the camera, that's why, but I want to be able to work with you guys and answer any questions that you have as we go through this. So let's hit it. You know my alliterations: proper project production. What's that all mean? Well, basically, how do we get a jump? Like, how do we get hyper efficient again on a project long before we're ever the owners of the project, right? The best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is today. Well, let's figure out how to start yesterday. So keep that in mind as we go through this. We're going to talk about concept and design and working with your professionals to get a jump. We're going to talk about like sourcing contractors and setting the tone for what's to be expected and how you're going to move quickly and what partners you're going to want to work with on that. And then the administration of it, the permits, the submissions, getting the approvals, and how to compress as much of that as possible to reduce your timelines on these projects. And again, for those that have been with us for a while, this should come as no surprise to you. This is how we operate, right? We are hyper efficient and everything we do is about processes, systems, and efficiencies. If you're new here and you're unfamiliar with our model, we advocate for the forced appreciation style model of rehabbing, right? It's typically construction heavy. We force appreciation by adding square footage. We do additions, add levels, new constructions, right? And so that warrants submissions, right? You're not going to do that without permits. A lot of the lipstick stuff, which we don't advocate for, you can go in and out and you can do some paint and carpet and no permits are required. But when it comes to the forced appreciation model, permits are required. And that's why project production is so important. So what all is production, right? Fancy word for it's the pre-construction phase is concerned with preparing all the information that the contractor will need to ultimately build the project, including the completion of applications for statutory approvals, right? Very formalized way of saying getting your ducks in a row, right? Getting your ducks in a row. That's what production is about. So let's talk about the concept and design piece and the professionals that you're going to work with to do this. All right. And so hopefully everybody's still seeing my screen. It's acting up. Okay. You're seeing my screen. I can tell by the ducks. Awesome. This is the kind of engagement we love. Emojis. Let's go. All right. Key function flow, fancy way of saying, who are my professionals? What are they doing for me? And in what order as I prepare to break ground on this project? I'm not going to wait until I close to go and bring my engineer and architect into the house. At that point, I will have wasted 30 days, maybe more. If you can get a 30-day or a 45-day close on these projects, which if you're buying them off MLS, there's no reason you can't, you're going to get access to the project. When you get access to the property, bring your engineer, bring your architect, right? Have an understanding with them that this project is theirs to lose. Get them on site, get an engineer doing a survey, right? That's money well spent. You're going to need that anyway. Get the, when you're doing your environmental, if you're doing a tank sweep or if you're scoping the sewers, right? Like these are things you're going to do as part of a home inspection. I'm using air quotes because we often buy as is and we won't necessarily need a home inspection, but still, there's an opportunity to get on site, to get in the property. All right, that's when you bring your professionals with you. Get an engineer in there, get an architect in there, have an architect field measuring so they can start working on a plan set. They're going to need the survey to finish out the plan set. You can go one step further, engage your designer. If you get these plans, these preliminary plans worked up, these floor plans ready, now you could already engage a designer and start thinking about what's the property going to look like. Visually, start thinking about 3D. How are you going to adorn the facade? What's the roof going to look like? What type of windows are you going to put in? What colors? What grill patterns, right? They can go so far as to start building you out a material schedule. You can compress a lot of this into 30 or 45 days prior to even closing. And so you're spending some money, sure, but you're compressing time. And then off to the right, when you think about how do I take it even one step further? Well, how do I pre-sell something I don't even own yet? I'm going to pre-sell something that doesn't yet exist that I don't even own. Well, you will have needed to work with your architect, your engineer, and your designer to take what the proposed floor plans are, spin up some 3D renderings on Fiverr, and then start putting those out to the market to see what the market, what the demand is for the product that you're going to create. This can all happen in 30 to 45 days prior to close. So that's what the key functions look like. Those are the people you're going to want to work with in the concept and design phase. Here's specifically what you're going to look for from each one, like regarding a survey, working with your engineer, you're going to want them to. And so again, this is pretty dense here. This is something that is worth taking a screenshot of and keeping this for reference later. Unless you're in the trenches doing this right now, this might not serve you, but I want you guys to understand that like the engineer is going to be responsible for these things, for figuring out what the building envelope is, what are the setbacks on the lot, where are the corner markers if you're going new construction, where is there a shed or a garage, total lot coverage. These are the kinds of things you're going to want to work with your engineer to identify, to then hand it off, right? Like key function flow, engineer, survey, hand off to architect, plan set, hand off to designer, material schedule. All right, so follow the flow and then think about, with regard to your architect, what are they going to be responsible for? So they've got the survey from the engineer. Now it's on them to figure out, okay, how are we going to cover the lot with house? What's max lot coverage per zoning? And then how much of that's going to be building? How much of that's going to be accessory buildings? Where are we going to do additions? Are we going to go out to the back? Are we going to go up over the existing? Are we going to go left or right? Are we going to turn a 1-car garage into a 2-car garage? These are the conversations you're going to be having with your architect based on the plan set that he's drafting to get you ready, right? Stormwater management, that could be him, or it could be an engineer that they work in parallel to figure out, hey, I'm going to add so much square footage on this lot. I'm going to change the lot coverage so significantly that I now need to manage for stormwater. I'm going to displace so much rainwater with my new roof that I now need to address that, right? You're going to want to know that. And that's something these professionals do all the time, right? So if this is feeling like something that you're not super familiar with, don't worry. That's why you hire these professionals in the concept and design phase. MEP, that's your mechanical, your electrical, your plumbing. That's where your architect is going to draw out your lighting plan, your plumbing risers, your gas risers, right? That's stuff that's going to go into a plan set that you're ultimately going to submit for approvals. And then room dimensions, they're going to tell you, hey, we're going to try and make all the bedrooms on the second floor 12 by 12. Okay, that's good to know. If they're going to tell you, hey, the best we could do up here, we have some like floor plan constraints, we can get an 8 by 10 bedroom. All right, well, then it's up to you to decide, are we going to shift some things around to make that bedroom more usable? Are we okay with having something like that as a nursery or an office? These are things you're going to have. These are conversations you're wanting to have in anticipation of closing and then eventually submitting the plans for review with the town. And then your designer preparing your material schedule. If they have a good plan set in hand, and if you can get an architect to turn something around in 2 weeks and hand that off to your designer, they could start thinking about what fixtures and finishes are going to go in the house. How are they going to source these things? That's a question you're going to want to ask. You're going to want to understand, is it going to be my responsibility as the homeowner or project manager or GC to source the things that the designer selects? And if you're designing your own house, then of course it's going to be up to you to do that sourcing, figuring out what like prices I'm willing to pay and what the allowances are for things, getting a jump on this stuff, thinking, okay, well, I've got 2,800 square feet of flooring. Am I going to go with red oak #2, or am I going to go with white oak select? Well, I have to understand where the market is, what the market will bear, and then that'll dictate what kind of finishes I put in. I want to be thinking about that and talking to my professionals about that in the concept and design phase. Let me, like I said, that part was going to be really, really dense. So I'm going to pause there. Any questions on that while I hydrate? Push those questions through. I want to see that everybody's kind of following along as we're doing this. And I want to make this very interactive. So any questions, push them through in the chat. It's great that we can work through this and field questions as we go, because when it comes to concept and design and this flow and thinking about like working with these professionals, right? Like if you haven't yet done this, or if you're not in the trenches doing this now, it's so valuable to understand what it looks like when it's done right. Right. And so you might not have questions because you might not be doing it right now, but I want you to be conscious, like, hey, this is what it looks like when you do the pre-work, when you do the production properly. Do you bring the architect in prior to close? Always. That's for sure one of our, that's a key element of how we do deals and how we teach others to do deals that differentiates us from everybody else. No one wants to put a deposit down with an architect until they know they're getting the house. Well, we're like, they know they got the house, I should say. Well, excuse me, we are going to assume the sale. We're going to trust that that closing is going to happen. And we're going to give our architect a deposit and get him out to do field measurements. that's a really good way to get a jump. Like, it makes no sense to buy the house, then bring the architect in a week or two after closing. Bring them in a month before closing, spend that $1,500 if that's what's required to get on his calendar, to get those field measurements. Because once he's got them, then he can work from there. He doesn't have to come out to the site again. What's included with environmental? So it's a different grouping of professionals, but essentially, depending on what market you're in, you may need to do a tank sweep to make sure there's no buried underground oil tanks. You may want to look for septics or cesspools. You may want to sweep, scope with a camera, scope the sewers, make sure the sewer line hasn't been compromised. These are things that you would do with other vendors that are not like captured here, but each time you're doing those things, right? Because that's going to be part of your home inspection. I used air quotes when I said that earlier. It's gonna be part of your home inspection. These are things you're gonna want to do before you buy the house anyway. So each time you're doing that, you're gonna have a plumber come in and scope the sewer to make sure there's no root intrusion and that your sewer is not compromised. While the plumber's in there doing that, your architect should be in there field measuring, right? Like, kill two birds with one stone. Tyler, wouldn't you work with the engineer and the architect at the same time to save time? So that depends on whether or not they work in-house together. If you've got an architect, like if you've got a design build firm, then they're going to have an architect and an engineer on staff, and then you can work hand in hand together. What we find in our market and in a lot of markets where like we're actively doing deals and coaching students who are doing deals is that those two functions are separate. In a lot of places, an engineer will do the surveying, do the topography, doing the sediment control, doing a lot of those types of things, and an architect will just draw. So that depends on your market, and you'll have to like kind of do some research and decide how you're going to approach it, given what the standard is in your market. But yeah, to answer your question, when they work together in-house is much better and more expensive, surprisingly. Sourcing contractors and putting the right trades in place to move forward. Now that you've done the concept and design, working with the right professionals, let's shift and start thinking about the trades. And it's not a shift necessarily. Like, you're not going to stop working on concept and design with your professionals. Of course, you'll be working that in parallel alongside this. And so what all does this entail? Well, as you're doing this concept and design work with your architect and you're getting a scope of work built out, because now you know what you're drawing and what you're intending to build. I'm going to do a 600 square foot addition off the back of the house. It's going to be 2 stories, and I'm going to widen the 1-car garage into a 2-car garage. Say generally that's the scope of work. Well, now you're going to start getting that dialed in, and you're going to start looking for tradesmen, looking for GCs, looking for individual trades to bid the work based on the preliminary plans that you're crafting. And so where are all the good ones? If you guys have been on these calls before, you've heard me say, like, I'll tell you where they're not. They're never at Home Depot. They're never at Lowe's, right? That whole run to Home Depot thing, like, oh, I need to go get material, I have to run to Home Depot. To me, that's the biggest indication that I'm working with the wrong tradesman. I want the contractors that plan ahead. I want the contractors that have relationships with the supply houses, with the lumber yards, with the plumbing supply. I want those guys and girls that plan in advance, order their materials based on takeoffs that they do using the plans that you give them, right? Like, that's how they know how much material they're going to need. They don't wait till they're at the job and then start measuring and realize, hey, I don't have enough material here. Let me run to Home Depot 3 times today, right? They show up at the job, the material's there, all the material they need is there, and then they work. So those are the kinds of trades you want to be looking to connect with to do these deals. And just to kind of break that down a little bit further, based on the scope of the project, you may be working with tier 1, 2, or 3 trades. And so this is how we kind of think through that. Like, a tier 1 tradesman is going to be somebody that can quickly jump in and out, work alongside a friend, a nephew, a cousin. It's 2 guys in a truck with a magnet on the side. They're likely using someone else's insurance, right? Like, they can't stamp a plan set for you for submissions. A tier 2 tradesman is like a slightly bigger operation. It might be 2 licensed electricians with 2 helpers. They have their own insurance. They have 2 insured vehicles. Like, think about that. And then like a tier 3 is a full-blown operation. They have a yard, they have multiple vehicles, they have administrative staff that handles invoicing, right? When you need to do something with them, you're not like calling them in the field, you're calling the office, and the office is facilitating, sending a service tech out, doing payables, doing receivables, right? So those are all like the things to be mindful of when you're thinking of tier 1, 2, and 3 trades. And then which one do you use on your project? Well, the scope of the project will dictate, right? And if it's a forced appreciation style rehab, like the stuff we talk about and teach inside of our groups, right? Additions, add levels, certainly new constructions, you're going to push to a tier 2 or 3 tradesman, right? You're going to inundate a tier 1 tradesman on a project like that. They're just not built for that type of work, for that kind of volume. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me know in the comments if the projects you're doing warrant tier 1, 2, or 3 tradesmen. I'm just curious, based on like the projects, for those of you that are actively doing deals, what are you typically seeing make sense on your projects? Are you going with that tier 1 trade, magnet on the side of the van, doesn't necessarily have his own license, or he can't stamp your tech sheets and you're worried if he's even insured, or like that tier 3, like full-blown operation? Question from Steph: have you established relationships with the supply houses, or do you allow your trade company to take care of all the material? So depending on how big your operation is, or you intend for it to be, you can ultimately get licensed as a GC yourself and then open trade accounts with the supply houses. And that's what we've done. And that's what some of our students have done as they've scaled their businesses and they've grown. Now they are their own buyer of lumber, drywall, insulation. They can buy direct from the supply house at wholesale and then just hire labor to come in and do install. If you're earlier on in your journey, your first handful of projects, you're not going to do that. Clearly, you're going to trust that the contractor you hire is going to leverage his or her relationship to buy the material. So hopefully that's helpful. And I'll quickly go through these. I put these in. These aren't related to project production necessarily, but they are critical in project execution. So like I said, I'll go through them quickly. You guys have seen these before if you've been on these calls. Our trade tracker, essentially the beating heart of any fix and flip operation. These are the trades in dark green, those chunks of trades that are going to get this project pushed along. In light green, they're kind of like those ancillary trades that feed in and keep the process moving. Think like that process flow in construction and design, with your engineer, your architect, your designer, and ultimately kicking that over to marketing. Same thing here, like what tradesmen have to come in what order to push this project along the timeline. And so, yeah, hopefully you guys have seen this before. If you haven't, there's another one that's worth screenshotting, keeping this for reference. This still lives in our office above the whiteboard where all of our projects are tracked. So that should tell you, even years later, how critically important this is. Same thing here. This milestone template, making sure we're tracking things in order. Each of these is a step in the process. I won't spend too much time here, but just want to show you guys what a system looks like. And then one last thing on executing in the field with the tradesmen, no lost days. That's like one of our core values is speed. And what does that mean? It means we don't lose any time. We touch every project every day, right? Whether that's through our project manager or the GCs, right? Like, if the project's out of state or it's something that's not close by, somebody's visiting every day and uploading photos into our shared Slack channel. We're doing payables at the end of every week, making sure that all the tradesmen are getting paid, that they're invoicing each week and being paid each week. So that way the project keeps moving week in, week out. And then you can ask for draws from your lenders if you're borrowing money to do these deals, which most of us are. You want to be able to ensure you're making progress. So that way you can put in for draw requests and your lenders can release money so you can keep feeding the machine. Because just like the trade tracker is the lifeblood, it's the beating heart of the operations business. The draws and the money is like the lifeblood of the fix and flip. Like, you're not going to get anything done if you can't pay tradesmen to do the work. And so we'll keep jumping. But again, just wanted to put these 3 in as a bonus. And now we'll talk on building permits. And the approvals process, this is not going to be an exhaustive list. This is something to give you for reference. And you're going to put this all together working with those same folks, right? Like first, again, concept and design, working with your professionals, being proactive, engineer, architect, designer, starting to put together a vision for what you're going to create. Then working with tradesmen, contractors, GC, project manager, field folks to figure out what's it going to cost and how are we actually going to like bring this vision to life. And now it's getting the approvals to go and do that work. And that essentially means putting together a folder, a jacket. Each town's going to have their own list of requirements. You're going to want to know what those are. You're going to go to the town, or likely your project manager or your GC is. They're going to ask the folks at the building department for a jacket, which is essentially a fancy folder full of forms that need to be filled out. And so what I've put here is, like I said, it's not an exhaustive list. It's a handful of things, tech sheets, right? Each of your MEP are going to need to fill out a tech sheet. How many fixtures are they going to put in? How many light switches? How many outlets? How much gas piping? How many appliances, right? You're going to want to be able to work with your plumber, your electrician, your HVAC tech to get that done. Zoning application, if you're changing the footprint of the home, which in forced appreciation style rehabs, you almost always are, you're going to need to make sure that it's qualified per zoning, right? That you're not putting too much house on too small a lot, basically. We talked about drainage. If you are adding enough square footage, you may be required to manage the stormwater that you're going to displace with this bigger house. If so, it's not as overwhelming as it sounds. Again, you work with your professionals, your engineers and architects help you with that. Manuals is just what it sounds like. It's the PDFs for the appliances. How many appliances, how big are they? How much are they going to pull? Like how much juice will they require? How much gas? How many CFMs for the hood? So you just print out the PDFs for the appliance package that your designer spec'd ideally. Contractor licenses, that doesn't need much explanation there. You're going to be working with ideally licensed and insured contractors. So you're going to want their licenses photocopied, put into that jacket to submit. Sealed survey from the engineer. Again, that's what it sounds like, right? It's got to be stamped and sealed by the engineer. Construction drawings stamped and sealed by your architect. Fire cert, if you're going to do anything chimney related, you're going to eliminate an old hot water tank or boiler, and you're going to go with direct vent appliances like the ones that are popular now, right? A tankless hot water heater in place of an old tank that used to vent up through the chimney. Well, you don't need to do that anymore. So a fire cert is typically something that your plumber just quickly fills out. And then insurances, making sure that everybody has the right kinds of insurances, including you on your project. Quick question from Tyler. Do you apply for the permit yourself? And are you the point of contact, or do you have a builder GC apply on your behalf? Another good question. So there's two ways to approach that. You can apply yourself and do what's called self-certify, and you can be the applicant as the homeowner. If you bought the house in the name of an LLC, that's not going to work. If you bought the house in your own name, you can self-certify. So be mindful of that. Again, you should really never buy the house in your own name if you're going to flip it. So if you're buying in the name of an LLC, they're going to want a licensed contractor to prepare the package and apply. So it really has a lot to do with how you're like approaching the project, but we always advocate for buying every deal in a new LLC to create separation, from you personally and the project. And in that sense, every submission is going to need to be done by a professional, a GC who has a license. We have our own, and we advocate for getting your own if you're going to do enough projects. If you're doing, the threshold is about 4. If you're going to do 4 projects at any given time, I'm of the opinion, get a GC license and do your own applications. Hopefully that's helpful, Tyler. And then the submissions process and how do you expedite it? This is just more administration, right? Like we talked about the front end concept and design, sourcing the right tradesmen, and then like, how do you really push this stuff through? Well, we know what documents for the most part we need to like kind of aggregate and put together as part of the folder. And then like, how do we make sure this gets done? Well, another core value, this one is just like speed and touching everybody frequently, right? Like you got to know what's required, what the application requirements are, which of these documents, if all or more than what's here is required, know what the list is, have an exhaustive list, then figure out who your point of contact is going to be at the town. Who's the gatekeeper? Who's the person that's going to review the package when you show up with it and decide, yeah, this package is complete, I'm going to receive it, or this package is missing 2 of these things and you got to take it back and you have to resubmit. So ideally, if you had your application requirements figured out, you go to your submissions contact at the town with everything ready to go. By now, you will have done like the concept and design, you will have engaged the professionals, they will have worked with you to get the things you need in place. Like in this case, number 7 and number 8, number 4, right? These would have come from your professionals. You're going to contact the trades. They would have helped you put together number 2, number 6, number 10, number 9, right? So you're working with these people to ultimately, number 5, prepare a complete package, right? This is what you're looking at. This is a complete package handed over to the town, ultimately approved, stamped, and permits issued so you can go to work. And generally, one last question. So if you buy in the name of an LLC, the city will make you have a GC apply for the permit. Yes, for the most part, that's the way it works. If there's an LLC as the owner, they're going to assume that the expectation here is that you're going to flip the house. And so if that's the case, you would be hard pressed to self-certify as the owner. You may be able to show them that you're the sole owner of the LLC, and then they might let you self-certify and submit on your own behalf. But I would probably assume that if you're going to do that, they're going to say, hey, listen, you own this in the name of an LLC. Clearly your intention here is to flip it. And if that's the case, we need to have a licensed GC submit. So again, we're talking about the exception, not the rule. The rule is if you own in an LLC, you're going to need to have a professional GC with a license put in the package for you. And so, yeah, just to bring it all full circle, concept and design, the very first phase is engaging the professionals, working with the architect, the engineer, and the designer to do the pre-work, then taking that pre-work, the preliminary plan set, and putting it in front of your tradesman, your GC, your plumber, your electrician, your HVAC tech, your mason, right? Be putting that in front of them so they can start thinking about what it would look like to do this work, and they can give you a really dialed in scope of work, and you can really cost of construction, so you could build a really good scope of work, and then putting the package together. All this is happening in parallel, so you can put this package together. So the day you close, you walk straight from the closing table to the town and hand this over. And that's it, friends. Now my challenge to you is, what about this can you see implementing in your existing business to get more efficient, to really reduce the timeline, especially on the front end prior to close? That's where I want you to direct your focus. And so, as I often do at the end of these calls, I want to challenge you with a question like, what can you do? How can you dial in your process? And let's jump in. And any questions? We got a couple of minutes. I know I went through that quick. And like I said, it's dense, right? It's a dense topic. And it's one that's mostly relevant to folks that are actively doing deals, but it's also relevant to those of you that are actively farming, right? And marketing for deals. Because when you get a deal, the time to know what we've talked about isn't after you lock up a deal. It's before you lock up a deal, right? Like that's how you're going to really move. So yeah, I hope this brings you value as you're looking for deals as well. Some questions. What do you need to become a GC? That's different in every municipality, or every state, I should say. It's not municipality driven, it's state driven. The states will dictate. So we're licensed GCs in New Jersey, where all you do is pay for the license and get insurance. It's very straightforward. And there are a lot of states that are like this. And we're also in the process of getting licensed in Florida, where you have to take 3 tests. So it's not just, oh, pay and get insured. It's actually pass tests to prove you even know something before they'll allow you to get insured and then pay for the license. So it's different in each state, but encouraging you to do some research and figure out in your state what's required. Any other questions around either the concept and design phase, the trades piece, or the submissions piece? I want to leave you guys with like the understanding that what we opened with, the best time was yesterday, the next best time is today. So getting a handle on this stuff now, even if you've done a bunch of projects and you didn't do it this way, like now's the time to remedy that. On the next project, be proactive, right? Do this production work. So when the time comes, you're in there swinging hammers, like significantly sooner. Question on material schedule. Who prepares the material schedule? If you're doing your own design, which if you like pain, you might be, but if you like efficiency, you'll hire that out. Your designer, whoever you bring in to do design work, is going to be the person who prepares the material schedule. And money well spent, if you ask me. Encouraging you guys to, if you haven't yet worked with a designer, work with one on your next project. You will not regret it. Eugene, so having an LLC can play a significant part in applying for the permit. Yeah, well, here's how to think about it. Like, and a lot of people will buy deals in their primary, right? They'll buy deals in their own name. And I don't know why folks do this. If you're like I said, if you like pain, do your own design work. If you like risk, buy houses in your own name. Like if you're going to flip a property, the last thing I'd want is it tied to me personally. We're going to do a great job. That's not the point. But like the LLC, the limited liability company, was created so that way we can take chances. It's limited liability. That's what it's all about. It limits the liability on the entrepreneur, encouraging them to take risk. Without limited liability companies, nobody would take risk, because in such a litigious society, if anything were to go wrong, the risk that you took, the liability, would flow through the organization to you, right? So when you're doing these deals, like, use LLCs. LLCs are vehicles in which these deals are meant to be done. And if by using the LLC, you get that protection, but then you're forced to apply for permits through a GC, that's a good trade-off. That's a trade you make every time. So if you're trying to self-certify to save yourself a couple of bucks, but at the same time putting your entire business at risk by buying and selling in your own name, I don't know that that's the trade you want to be making. It's certainly not the trade we want to make. So yeah, I know that's not the question, Eugene, but hopefully that gives you even more clarity as to why we do it. Question from Alice. So the architect needs to work with the designer as soon as the architectural plan is approved? Not necessarily. And what you'll find is if you go to a design build firm, you'll have architect, engineer, designer all under one roof. And of course, you're going to pay a premium for that. But if you work with an engineer who then hands off the survey to the architect, who then hands off the plan set to the designer, you won't have them working hand in hand. Maybe the designer will say, hey, I want to see these floor plans manipulated a certain way. This room is too small. This room is too big. This room should be in the front of the house. This room should be at the back of the house. There's definitely some of that. And you could see them working together in that capacity. But frankly, they don't tend to work that well together. Designers and architects are kind of oil and water. And so what you're going to want to do is get it sorted with the engineer, get it sorted with the architect, and then get it sorted with the designer, kind of in that hierarchy, in that order. So hopefully that's helpful. And that's not the exception, of course, that's the rule, but there is a world where you can work with an architect who is married to a designer and they love working together, and you can kill two birds with one stone in that scenario and not pay as much of a premium as if you were to work with a design build firm. So hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, engineer, architect, designer, that's usually the handoff. The designer can't design without floor plans. The architect can't draw floor plans without a survey, and the engineer creates the survey. So if you think about that chart I showed you guys, they kind of flow straight through chronologically. So yeah, it looks like that's all of our questions. This one was fun. I love this topic. I've talked on this more than once. If you're catching this for the first time, this one was a treat. This is worth pausing. It's worth replaying. It's worth going back through, save this, tag this. This is one you're going to want if you haven't yet done a deal. And if you're in the middle of a deal, if you're acquiring a deal right now, you're going to want this. You're going to want to do it this way. I promise you, this is how you save money. This is how you really compress time on your projects. Changes are expensive. So are we working with the engineer to avoid mistakes? Changes typically are going to come in the form of architectural oversight. So you're not going to be working with the engineer necessarily to avoid costly mistakes. That's going to happen in architecture. That's where you're going to want to be like really thorough. Work with your architect to make sure that everything is as you want it, because that's where later on it gets expensive. If an architect drew something, if he over designed the house or whatever the case is, put a bedroom where a bathroom should be, or vice versa, right? There's a whole host of things that architects will do that make sense to them, but don't make sense to an end buyer. And you have to do that rework later. That's where it gets expensive. So make sure that's dialed in. Again, another great call, guys. This was awesome. I appreciate you spending these 40 minutes with us each Wednesday. Hopefully this was of value to you. If you want to learn more about this stuff, about this process, reach out to us. Whether you do that here or you do that in the Facebook group, comment there, let us know. And someone from the team, we're happy to get on the phone with you, talk to you about how we do this at the next level inside of Accelerator, where guys and girls are implementing these things and are thriving and are crushing and are doing big deals. You've seen us tag them in the group, right? So you know the kinds of stuff I'm talking about. And yeah, hope to see a bunch of you on the inside soon. Everybody have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, and I'll see you next week.